Hi, I'm Corey.
Hi, I'm Tess.
Welcome to A Lovely Place.
We're so glad you've joined us as we invite Jesus into the midst of our lives, learning, and laughter.
We hope this podcast can encourage your heart and make you smile today.
Hello.
Hi, Tess. Hi, friends listening.
Yes, hello.
We got a chapter for you today.
We do.
Yes.
We are back with our featured book, Find Your People by Jenny Allen. And we're on chapter 7, which is titled Protected, but it's the picture of the anvil that we had talked about. The goal is accountability, and the stumbling block, the barrier is pride. So
yeah.
Oh, this is a good one, but it's a little bit of a doozy, you know?
Yes. A little doozy.
Yes.
Like this little quote here before she starts the chapter. I don't want people to judge me when I let my walls down, says Megan. And I can relate to her of like, how far do I take that wall down?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So in between each chapter, she has these quotes from like real people, and that was what Corey was just talking about. And I think that those ones hit me, a lot of those, because I can relate to them. I think the one that stood out to me the most was, I'm afraid if I am vulnerable, I might be rejected. Because, if you don't try, you'll never be rejected, right?
Right. And and never deeply known either, right? Like that's
right.
That's the rush. That's the opposite of that. I don't know what I was saying right then.
Yeah. So this the chapter starts out by Jenny talking about how her and her group of friends were meeting together, and one of them was like, "So, Jenny, it seems like you kind of have a hard heart tonight. Like, what's going on?" And she's like, "Oh, I didn't want to have that conversation," but like realized that she really did need to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So, I think that, I don't know, sometimes I feel like I like those kinds of conversations, and I just haven't found enough people that are willing to have them with me. So I feel like I'm a little bit of the opposite. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think.
Well, and I feel like you would be that for me, but we're far apart now. So now that separates that. So
it's a little harder.
It's not the face-to-face accountability is not there in this
right? Yeah.
context. So
yeah. And it's different when it's not it's like, for us, I mean, I feel like we're good enough friends that we can read between the lines. But, sometimes like someone will tell you something and you'll be like, oh, yeah. And it's totally just their side of the story.
Right.
But then like if you're actually there to experience some of it, then you can be like, hey, well, actually, like,
time out.
Yeah. Maybe you're not telling me this as accurately as it actually happened or whatever. And then we can speak into that. So it is hard when we're not physically in the same place, It does,
which is the whole point of this book, of creating people that you're face to face with. Or creating friends, finding your people. Oh, man. I have read the book, I promise.
Proximity is a good thing.
Yes.
Oh, well, I thought this quote was really good. She said, "We resent being challenged on our behavior, but what if that missing element is exactly why we all feel like our relationships don't run deep?"
Wow.
And I think that's really true. Like if we don't have a relationship close enough to people that they're willing to call us out on things, then how close are you really?
Right. Not.
Yeah. Yeah, because life isn't all about just the good, happy stuff, like sometimes we need people to kick our butts, if you will,
Yes.
Yeah. So she was talking, I love how she brings a lot of her stories around to people that she's met in Africa because their culture is so very different than ours. And she was talking about her friend Jay, who used to live in the, like in a very poverty-stricken area of Africa. And then he moved, I'm assuming, to Texas, or was it
Atlanta?
Atlanta? Yeah. And she said what Jay couldn't have anticipated was that while life back in Kenya had been rough all those years, he'd enjoyed a type of prosperity that he didn't recognize until it was gone. Community, close relationship. And she was saying just that in their culture there, it's like they're all so close, and like doing life together all the time that they don't shy away from like saying, like calling each other out on things and being honest in that way. And I think sometimes in our over-offended culture, it's like you never know how someone's going to respond if you say like, hey, that wasn't cool, or whatever, like, and are trying to have honest communication like that they might just like stop being your friend.
Yeah.
So I did like what she said about like asking someone, like, are you open to us like having this kind of relationship with each other, because maybe someone isn't, and if you try that, then it will just be, then you will face rejection. It will be like, okay, we're not friends anymore.
Right. Well, it's like knowing what level you're at to get to that, and how much time have you spent together to what your expectations versus experiences, I think, is like.
Yes.
And you can't just overnight have a friend and then tell them all the things that are wrong with them, right?
Right.
Like, I don't think that would build
framework.
Right. Because
like
then that makes
what is it? Like you have to have, I think it's like 5 or 7 positive, comments or whatever to every negative kind of a thing for like in general in human relationships. Otherwise it's not a healthy relationship. So so yes, for sure, like have that foundation of like positive regard before you try to go into accountability.
Yeah. Here we go. We're jumping in, man. Yeah.
Yes.
And then to experience the benefits of it, right? Like that's not just, we're seeking out correction and our tracker charts are going to be checked off. Like it's a different, it's like life, and like what's Jesus doing in your life and in your heart that we can spur each other on and not be like, what are we doing? Like, okay,
yes.
how can we truly encourage each other and say like, hey, what's going on, to get to the heart, that deeper level? I think it's like, okay, well, maybe you're saying this, but what's really going on? Like, it takes time and a pause, I think, to get to that in any conversation, even friends that you're friends with. I think it takes that, like that little dance. I don't know if that's the right way to say it or whatever, but like,
and being tactful about things instead of just, because if you do something without at least some consideration for how it sounds or comes off, then you can easily just be that really rude person. Like, always tells people,
and then you just get dismissed and checked off. Like, I'm not gonna go there. Like, it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. What if I did? What would happen? What would change?
Right. Which it makes me think of like the Love and Respect book. It's like you got to have those things before you can, try to really enter into some of the deeper parts of a relationship, a friendship even, it's like in order to listen to someone, you have to know that they love and respect you. Otherwise it will just be like, well, whatever,
Yeah.
So I loved her quote where she said, you and I need friends who, instead of trying to fix us, help us to fix our eyes more firmly on Jesus. I was like, oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, this whole chapter kind of reminds me, I've been reading a lot in the Old Testament, like I'm in Isaiah and like some of the minor prophets right now too, when Israel and Judah are like going off the rails and being really not faithful to God. And the prophets come and I'm like, prophets have a terrible job.
Yeah.
Like it's their goal to help the people like find God, like return to God, return their hearts to God. But, if the people aren't in a position that they want to hear that, then the prophets get pretty mistreated, I think, and so that just it's like the whole point of it though is to return hearts to God. Like that's, they talk about all of the perfect sacrifices that God despises them because their hearts are far from him, and so it's like this whole process, like with this book and with having friends that keep us accountable and like with the prophets is to return hearts to God. Like that's what he is wanting. He wants our hearts, and I think if we come at it from any other position of like just pointing out what someone has done that isn't right, then it doesn't have the desired effect,
Yeah. And I'm like, what fruit is my life illustrating? Like, is that evident in my life? And like, I don't know if I'm the one that would be the perfect one to see whether that is happening or not. Like, just like, hey, what's happening? And then I think sometimes it's too easy to just be like, oh, yeah, you're doing it. Like, not to be like, oh, well, what if you changed this and then that happened? Or, just like trying to see relationships differently. I feel like this is like turning it on its head in my world. Like, what would this actually look like if you were in a healthy relationship? Well, they can function this way.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I'm learning a lot. So maybe that's where I am at in my personal journey. I'm just like learning what that looks like and not being afraid of it. And then being able to be like, oh, okay, I want someone in my life that can say, hey, what if you say yes to this and no to that because X, Y, and Z or whatever.
Yeah.
That's
someone to help
yeah.
like change your perspective on things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if it's just us, if our voice is the only one we hear, or even the voice that we think, like what we think God might be saying, but we don't ever let anyone else into the equation, then we have a very limited perspective of what's going on,
And then are we like the Proverbs verse, where it seek counsel or multitude of counsel there is wisdom. And it's like, well, if you don't have people that you're in community with and in give and take, like who is that? Like the internet is
right. Ooh, that doesn't sound good.
Multitude of counsel, maybe that's for reviews of buying a new lamp is fine, but just like
life decisions, maybe not.
It's like, okay, wait a minute. How can where's my people here? I think that is a feeling of like, oh, I don't know.
Well, it made me laugh because Jenny talks about how they were getting ready to meet with their group, their life group or whatever. And the leader was like, okay, everybody, bring your financials, like bring your budget. Yeah. And she was like, what? What are we doing?
Yeah.
But she talks about how they all got together when one family was pursuing like buying a house, and they all like talked about it. And she said, people asked questions, people made observations, people offered alternatives for consideration, people prayed for clarity and wisdom on behalf of the prospective home buyers. And as I sat there taking in all this activity, something almost tangible fell away from me.
Yeah.
Fear fell, because I saw how beautiful and reassuring accountability could be. And I think that's, to me, where, before we started recording, we were talking, well, how does the chapter being protected have anything to do with accountability and the anvil? We were like, how do these tie together?
Right.
But it's like with this accountability of having other people speak into our lives, they're does come this protection along with it, because you're not just going out there on your own. It's like we always have Jesus and he protects us, but I think it just gives us that much more surety of where we're stepping
Right.
if we have people with us and behind us, um and that's what God made the body of Christ to be, is, like, to function that way. So I loved that example that she gave, and I'm like, that sounds cool, like,
Yeah. And willing to let that conversation happen. It's not like you can just make up your own story of, oh, we can do this. It will be fine. Like, or the other way, not doing something because of fear. Like when we were trying to sell our house at Battleground, I, I didn't know how to do that or whatever. We had a conversation and it changed my perspective. Like, oh, you can use this equity and move it over to this, and then this happens. And I'm like, oh, my brain didn't even think that way. So I was just like how amazing it was to be able to invite counsel in and then be like, okay, that's
yeah,
interesting. Let's talk about that. And he was like encouraging us to pray about it as a couple after he left the conversation with us. Like, well, it's your guys' decision ultimately, but here's some more options of like putting things on the table. And
yeah,
so, like,
yeah.
I want to do that more often, but it's like, who can I do that with? Who are the people? So, hence,
Yeah.
find your people.
Yes.
Okay, Lord, help me find my people.
Yes. Yes, and amen. Me too.
Yeah.
And I think that that picture of the anvil, we were talking about, is just, it really is accurate, because accountability is not comfortable. Like, it's,
Right.
trying to establish that type of relationship with someone requires you to have, like, uncomfortable conversations. And I feel like, to a point, that's like part of how we became such good friends, was we had some, like, really uncomfortable conversations,
Yeah. Like, how do
almost
I do this?
in
Yeah.
the beginning of our friendship, that then, like, shaped and formed our friendship. And so it's like when you're using an anvil and forging, like, a tool or a weapon, like, it doesn't get sharpened just by sitting on the anvil. Like, you have to be
Right.
hitting it with the hammer, or even when you're sharpening, like, she was talking about sharpening knives. Like,
Right.
it's a kind of a violent process of, scraping them against the stone or whatever to sharpen them. And so it's not comfortable. It might be painful, but it's the only way that we can move forward to being, like, effective. Um,
Right.
and so it reminds me of a verse in Proverbs, Proverbs 27:17, which says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." So we can't do this alone. We're not made to do it alone. We can't be nearly as effective, um, or I think, like, fulfilled, if we're just going it alone.
Right. Right.
You know, we can't realize our true purpose without the people around us.
Yes. And
So,
it's harder when you're not being sharpened. Just thinking of my job cutting hair, a dull pair of shears is not a friendly tool. It's like, I know
right?
something that's sharp and that pays it, or that's ready to go, then it can be precise and a clean cut, where
Yes,
dull is like awkward and not that now I'm not talking about hair anymore, right?
right. Well,
But
but that
just like
makes
that conversation with the person that has your best in mind is like that sharp scissor that makes that clean cut, right? That's like,
yes,
hey, let's do this. Get rid of the dead ends. Now we're back to hair.
right. Well, it makes me think of pruning and gardening too. When you
Yeah.
prune, you have to make sure that you have a sharp tool, because if you went to cut the branch and it, like, mangles it, then it is actually able to bring in, like, infection and stuff into the plant.
Yeah.
But if you cut it, and you cut it the right way, and you cut it with a sharp tool, then it has the best chances of me, growing larger and moving forward. And
Uh-huh.
it makes me think of there's a verse in Proverbs that talks about, like a wound from a friend can be trusted or whatever, so it's like we do this whole accountability and being honest thing, not to hurt other people, but to, it might be painful in the moment, but it's to move us to something better,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but it can be uncomfortable.
Yes. Definitely so.
Yes. Well, listeners, thank you for joining us for this conversation. We hope
bet.
that you are reading along with us. This is a really great book by Jenny Allen, and definitely worth the read. So I would recommend getting it from your library or buying it or whatever. I've enjoyed during this process, like requesting new books at the library. And then I'm like, okay, so I can be the person who requests it. And then other people will get to enjoy
read it.
reading
Yeah.
it too. And it might pop out to them on the shelf. Maybe they wouldn't have seen it otherwise,
Yeah.
So,
And I found the audio on the Libby app. Like, so sometimes the library will have it audio if it doesn't have it in the physical book.
Yes. Yep. But we will talk to you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you, friends.
Next time. Bye.
Bye.